Yeah, thank you so much for this nice introduction. It's really a pleasure for me to be here and to talk a little bit about my work and to talk about the knowledge transfer in my field in cybersecurity. And I would like to talk about this topic of knowledge transfer actually from a data perspective. So from the sharing of data and what does it mean. Like we live in a very digitized world, data is getting more and more important, and so I would like to focus a little bit what data actually means and what the sharing of data actually means. And so after I talk a little bit about my work, I would also like to talk about a little bit about the implications regulations like the GDPR, like the General Data Protection regulations in Europe have for people that actually work in the US and develop digital products in the US, also for the European market. And then I would also like to share a little bit my experience working with universities. I was lucky enough to study here in the US, writing my thesis about the cybersecurity field or in the cybersecurity field, and then basically join industry company and where I'm also like working in research and also collaborating a lot with different universities in the US. So to start my work or to tell you a little bit about my work, I'm, as I mentioned, a cybersecurity researcher. I'm a computer scientist by training. And the most important part of my day-to-day work is really analyzing data and working with a lot of data. So what my team and I are doing, we develop different technologies, especially different detection technologies, where we focus on the development of AI, of artificial intelligence and different machine learning techniques to actually find out new cyber campaigns that's going on, cyber attack campaigns going on, new vulnerabilities, new cyber threats that are maybe out there. And of course, we could not do this with data. Data is like really the key point or the key resource in our field. If we wouldn't have data, we could not do that. Everyone of you like knows that data is essential for science, of course, right? And especially in the field of machine learning, of AI, you could not do this without data. And the more data we have, the better. So actually, if I could make a wish list, what I want to do as a scientist, I really want to inspect everything, every network connection, every internet connection that's going on, every log file, because then we could basically almost detect, or we could detect much more than what the industry already can do. But what we see is the trends are going in a different direction. And to some extent, this is a good point, because we see that people are getting more and more aware of their privacy, of their data privacy, that data is really important. Whatever we share on social media, whatever we post on the internet, can actually be used in a cyber attack, for example. And typically also a cyber attack starts with something, if it's a targeted attack, starts with something that an attacker would find about a certain person, about a certain organization, somewhere on the internet, or even talking directly to someone, calling them maybe, right? So this really goes in the direction that people are getting more aware of this problem, and like the implications that we see in our research when we detect new antivirus software, for example, or new firewall technologies. What we face more and more is that the trend is going that the data is getting more and more encrypted. I don't want to get too technical, but basically encryption means you obfuscate the information that you share in a mathematical way that you basically cannot read the plain text, right? If we send an email, it's encrypted, it's obfuscated. So a pretty big challenge in my research work that my team and I are working on is actually to work with data or like to detect new attacks without actually looking at the actual data, without looking at the plain text or the underlying data, but just mostly work with meta information that does not violate the privacy, or we don't violate the privacy, but that we we don't have to, look at the plain text. So this is a really important topic, and I'm sure all of you or many of you heard about the recent ransomware attacks that were going on in the US, but also globally, right? Which is actually, if you think about it, cyber attackers are actually taking our data hostage and then demand a ransom. So all those unfortunate attacks, of course, they have a positive effect because it creates more awareness. People are getting more and more aware that data privacy, whatever I share, is very important. And so that this kind of brings me to my next topic in my talk. What is like the implications of like the data regulations, the GDPR, the European General Data Protection Regulation? What implications do those have in our work here in the US? To just give you an example, I think it's a very good way that Europe is going here, but it has also some benefits and maybe some, let's call it, challenges. Like when I was back in Austria last Christmas, and around January, February, actually many of my Austrian relatives and friends asked me, hey, I got up like a pop-up message on my phone. The Messenger WhatsApp that I'm sure many of you are using is saying, hey, there will be a big update on the privacy policy, how my data will be used. And so I've actually took that opportunity and just wrote like a brief blog post, and we analyzed what's the difference between that privacy policy in Europe and globally. And the good news is that actually the European version of this new privacy policy, because of GDPR, was much more protecting the users' data and the users' privacy compared to users in the US or like anywhere else around the world. So Facebook actually cannot, the parent company of WhatsApp cannot actually look at the data from European users, or cannot share them as they want to. And we see similar trends here in the US, for example, with the California Consumer Privacy Act, which goes a very similar way as the GDPR. That is getting much more stricter to what we can do with data and what people can actually do with data. So this is the big benefits of regulations that we have, that people are getting more and more aware of that. In my field, it's a little bit of a challenge, right? Because the development of digital products, not just for cybersecurity, for any digital company, like if you think about big companies like Google, Facebook, they heavily rely on data and the sharing of data, and whoever chooses what to share. I'm sure many of you, for example, used probably Google Maps to come here, like I did, to find my way around the city. If you, for example, see that there's a traffic jam on Google Maps, that's not because Google knows or Google has any cameras somewhere, right? Or there's someone standing and telling someone at Google, hey, there's a traffic jam. They know because people that use this Maps application are slowing down on a road where you usually would maybe go like 30 miles an hour. So they can basically compute or predict that there's a traffic jam going on, because many people or many users are sharing their data and sharing this knowledge and this information, right? So we see that there is really different aspects of data sharing. One thing that I would like to also mention here, as I already said, the GDPR, this data regulations, has somewhat of an impact, because a lot of the research and development departments of the big IT companies, the one I'm working for including, is mostly in the US. Like almost all of our R&D is done here in the US. Some is also done in Israel in my field. But as a security researcher here in the US, I cannot even look at European data because of the data regulation, which I already mentioned has some good aspects, right? It protects the user's privacy, but we actually often see that there are different trends of cyber campaigns going on in different regions around the world. So if we cannot even look at European data, if we have to rely on data mostly from the US or from other regions in the world, it could also have some disadvantages maybe for the development of digital products. And so I think Europe has to, and there's Austria included, of course, has to be also a little bit careful and not to fall back, because we maybe restrict ourselves too much. So again, there's like a fine balance where to find the optimum there, as you often do in science, is not that easy, right? So this is one aspect that I really see in my day-to-day work. If I want to work with European data, I would have to go to Europe. I cannot look at this data here. That's especially a big topic in security. One thing that I would like to discuss next is my experience working with universities. So as I already mentioned, I was lucky to study at the US university, to come here for my PhD. And during my PhD, I also already worked with a lot of different companies here in the US. And now I'm actually lucky enough to see it from the other side, from the industry side, working for a big company, and also working together with universities who really do like great fundamental and basic research that we can use for in our own research, either from scientific papers or through collaborations we have with different research groups around the US. One interesting thing, though, when we usually start to work with universities, establish some research collaborations, they typically don't ask us, or the first thing universities don't ask us is usually not money. Like, they often have like a good funding situation, but actually what universities are most interested in is data. They want the sharing of data, which is not very easy for us to do because of different customer agreements that we have, right? We are very cautious with the data that we have. What we do with it, we have to be. And so how we, when we work with universities, what we actually often give them is like part of the funding or part of the research support is to give them devices and share devices that they can actually collect their own data. Or we anonymize the data in a way that it can be used and can be shared. So this is how we often work with universities. And one thing that I see working with different research groups, with different faculty members at the US universities, is that they really do like great work on fundamental research, on really developing fundamental technologies and making breakthroughs there. But I also often see a gap from the work that's done at universities and how it can be actually applied in a product in the real world. And that gap, I would say, I experienced it myself as being like a graduate student here. I was working on one of the largest US collaboratives between different US universities and different industry companies to basically establish a science for cybersecurity. And also what I experienced there is that this gap is often because universities, and that might be very specific to my field, but that universities don't have that data that a digital company have. Like, we have sensors all around the world globally that record different internet flows, different cyber campaigns, or like the data to analyze those. And universities typically don't have that, right? So I see a little bit that the gap is coming from that. And by working with universities, by collaborating with them, we basically help them or like work with them to close this gap. That the research, the fundamental research that they do can also be transferred into and applied in real world products. But there's always, of course, a mutual agreement, right? A mutual benefit agreement between working with industries or working between industries and universities. And that's, of course, also the topic of recruitment. So the sharing of knowledge as a industry company often comes with getting the best brains, right? Getting the best people from universities. So what we actually often do when we fund research projects and when we fund universities is that we help students, help PhD students, and really fund them from the beginning of their career and work with them, invite them for internships, and then, of course, we hope that they would choose to maybe join us when they graduate, and that's really a very good source of knowledge, good source of brain power that we really rely on, because especially in the field of cybersecurity, it's really hard to find good people. We cannot typically find the people or find as much people as we would like to hire. What we also do when we try to fund those research groups and students is that we not just try to work with the top schools, right? We don't want to just be focused on like one area. We actually often try to pick schools that maybe serve certain minorities in the US, because we want to have this diversity. And we really see that if you have different diverse backgrounds from different social backgrounds, students from all around the world, but also from different, let's say, groups, maybe also underrepresented groups, we really see that working together in a very diverse environment gets so much innovation and gets us so much ideas. And that's really one focus area that we have, that we typically also focus on when we try to work with universities, try to sponsor them and try to support them. So to conclude my talk, the message that I would like to deliver is that the sharing of knowledge is really often the sharing of data, right? And the sharing of data is, especially in the field of IT and digitalization, is so crucial and so important. And it's up to us, or it's up to us to find what's the right balance of sharing and not sharing, because of the examples that I was discussing. The more we have to be cautious what we share, but we also have to be aware that if we don't share anything, there is also a blocker for research and innovation. So with that, I would like to end my talk. I hope this was interesting, and thank you.